Heartbreaking tragedy in Madison, Wisconsin. This after a school shooting at a private school. The shooter was a 15-year-old female student who took her own life after killing 2 others and severely injuring several more students. Now investigators are talking about a motive and a manifesto, and we have all the newest details. But first, big news today in the case everyone is talking about, the murder of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. A brand new 11-count indictment has been handed down by a New York grand jury, and everything has gotten a whole lot more serious for the alleged Ivy League killer Luigi Mangione. The grand jury has upped the charges from second-degree murder to first-degree murder, the top charge in New York. What does this mean for Mangione? And can prosecutors prove it? Plus, tonight we go inside the mind of an alleged assassin as a man who spoke to Mangione just before he went off the grid reveals a lot more about the super-rich accused killer from Maryland. Tonight, we have all the latest.
I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. I want to start with 3 words. Not a hero. He's not. He's not a hero. There is a part of the public, a lot of it on social media, bubbling up, talking about this. Take a step back, folks. Take a step back. This was someone who was born into privilege, born into power, born into money, who, if he really wanted to change things, make things better, he had the means. He had a way to do it. He had a way to be a real hero. Access to powerful people, access to the money to get it started, and access to what God graced him with, which was an amazing intellect and a work ethic that drove him through at least the first 25 years of his life. You take all that and you put it towards a real cause. And you lead the cause if you want. That's how you change things. The only thing this is going to change is it's going to have every CEO spending a little extra money for security. And Luigi Mangione will be incarcerated. Those are the only 2 things that are changing as a result of this. He's not a hero. He just isn't. Now, the motive for the murder from the beginning, this is what we've been talking about. Why did someone take out the CEO? And now prosecutors believe it's Luigi Mangione. That's where the evidence is pointing. So why did he do it? You know, in most cases like this, it's somewhat irrelevant for prosecutors, but all of a sudden it's becoming very relevant because we're learning about the motive for the murder from the words of the defendant himself in his alleged manifesto. The manifesto reveals what he's thinking and why he's doing what he's doing. What is motivating him? What does he want to happen? What is the reason for all of this? And this is where it gets a little tricky for Luigi Mangione. Because the reason he did this, which seemingly became public through the manifesto, through the writing on the casings, has elevated his status among that certain population that considers him a heroic figure. But at the same time, that revealing the motivation and the reason elevates him in the eyes of these people, it elevates the charges against him. It's the yin and the yang of it all. So while I don't know if he's going to feel better about all this because people have acknowledged him, are getting tattoos of him, but it has put the rest of his life in jeopardy in terms of whether or not he'll ever even have an opportunity or a chance for freedom, despite the fact that he's only 26. That's because this is terrorism. And New York has a little bit of a history with terrorism, which is why when you talk about terrorism, you talk about the most serious of the serious. And there was a big, big change today as a result of what the grand jury was up to. And joining us to discuss it, he's been all over this case since the beginning, Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas. Cody, great to see you. It's a huge day. New indictment.
Right here.
And a press conference explaining what's going on there. What can you tell us?
Yeah, Vinny, right here, this new indictment came down officially in New York City, in the state of New York, charging him with murder, multiple murder charges coming down against Luigi Mangione. And Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg kind of walks us through in a press conference today what those indictments are, all the charges that he's charged with, and the sentences that each of those charges carry. And Vinny, I'll tell you, they are some pretty hefty sentences. Take a listen to this.
Luigi Mangione, the defendant, is charged with 1 count of murder in the first degree and 2 counts of murder in the second degree, including 1 count of murder in the second degree as an act of terrorism for the brazen, targeted, and premeditated shooting of Brian Thompson, who, as you know, was the CEO of UnitedHealthcare. The maximum penalty possible for murder in the first degree and murder in the second degree as an act of terrorism is life without parole. The maximum penalty for murder in the second degree is 25 years to life.
And Vinny, you heard it right there, murder in the first degree. Second degree murder as a crime of terrorism. Second degree murder standalone. 6 criminal weapon charges. Mangione's up against a lot here with these indictments.
Yeah, life without the possibility of parole. There's no death penalty in New York, so this is as serious as it gets in New York. Let's talk about this terrorism accusation. What does the indictment tell us?
Well, according to the indictment, their definition of an act of terrorism is described as involving a violent act and acts dangerous to human life that were in violation of the criminal laws of this state and were intended to intimidate or coerce a civilian population, influence the policies of a unit of government by intimidation or coercion, and affect the conduct of a unit of government by murder, assassination, or kidnapping. And assassination is obviously the applicable term here for this shooting, Vinny. And law enforcement authorities today during that press conference kind of walked through how they made this decision to add that act of terrorism charge into the indictment as well. Take a listen to what they had to say.
And we've seen a real increase, sustained increase since December 4th in concern, not just from CEOs, but from corporations broadly. And so going back to the DA's point, you know, the intent to intimidate or coerce the civilian population, which is, of course, at the root of our state terrorism statute, is very much borne out in this reaction. And for good reason. We've had a torrent of online threats. We've had real-world activity that the police commissioner flagged, which is abhorrent, and it causes concerns.
And Vinny, you heard her there talk about online threats, real-world activity, and Luigi Mangione has unexpectedly garnered some support behind him. I mean, there's a GoFundMe with 6 figures supporting his legal fees. And there's some people online, of course we know people in social media, the world of social media, they make memes, they kind of make jokes just going along with the trends. But taking a listen to some of these people on TikTok that have a more out there approach to their support for Luigi.
People who keep wondering why we regard Luigi Mangione as a hero, we don't. We see him as the symbol he is in a time that he's needed.
I mean, this guy basically became the modern-day Martin Luther King. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if there's statues of him in the near future.
I guarantee you that no other CEO is going to want to be in this position, and they understand the fact that Luigi has opened a path, a way that many others might want to explore.
This whole corporate capitalist takedown is just, oh my God.
So Vinny, for whatever reason, these users may be supporting him, whether they've had a bad experience with UnitedHealthcare or healthcare in general, seems like Mangione has garnered a cult following, for lack of a better term, behind his cause here.
And it seems what prosecutors are looking at here is that the reaction to this, right? Mm-hmm. So because people are seeing him as a hero, other people might want to emulate him or put other CEOs in the crosshairs. And they're kind of putting that together to get to this intimidation of the civilian population, which is an interesting argument, interesting way to look at it. It's not traditional terrorism, right? It's not bombing a government building or taking out a government leader. It's a little bit different, but an interesting approach by prosecutors. All right, so what's coming up next now for Mangione?
So in 2 days, this Thursday, he has 2 hearings, bright and early, 8:30 a.m. and 9 o'clock a.m. in Pennsylvania. The first one at 8:30 will be discussing the state charges that he's facing in Pennsylvania, the gun charges, the fake ID to law enforcement, et cetera. But that second hearing that comes soon after at 9 a.m., that's going to be addressing his extradition back to New York, and that's where him and his defense counsel will have to decide if they're going to waive or fight that extradition. And Alvin Bragg, the district attorney, says they are prepared for either of those decisions to be made, and he addressed that today in the press conference.
We have indications that the defendant may waive that hearing, in which case he'd be brought to New York forthwith. In any event, we have been preparing on parallel paths, and before the hearing, we'll send to the governor of the state of New York the paperwork that would be necessary if he does not waive during that hearing.
And Vinnie, it is important to note that there is currently a bail petition hearing scheduled for December 30th in Pennsylvania, but whether that hearing will happen depends on the decision made at Thursday's extradition hearing.
Could be moot, as they say in the business. Cody Thompson, great job as always. Thanks so much. Let's bring in our think tank. Joining me, trial attorney, former police lieutenant Rick King. Also with us, trial attorney, fellow of the American College of Trial Lawyers, Ann Bremner, and criminal defense attorney and former federal prosecutor, Michael Sterling. Welcome to you all. Let me start first with Ann. Did you think this was going to turn into a terrorism case in New York?
You know, I've seen all the TikTokers. I didn't really think so, but now it makes sense. I mean, in terms of the wanted posters around New York of CEOs, you know, that this is like a cultural revolution, that these people are like targeted. And in fact, it didn't even have UnitedHealthcare. It totally makes sense to me now, but I didn't really see it coming. Did you? I mean, when I heard it, I'm like, of course that makes sense.
I didn't know exactly how you would get, because, you know, normal terrorism, Rick King, we're usually talking about going after the government, right? Government leaders, you know, trying to change something, a unit of government, as their statute says. But they're talking about intimidating a civil population. Let me put up the manifesto quote. I do apologize for any strife or traumas, but it had to be done. Frankly, these parasites simply had it coming. And then he also had an alleged to-do list, according to people.com. What do? You whack the CEO at the annual parasitic bean counting convention. It's targeted, precise, and doesn't risk innocence. What are your thoughts, Rick, about this as being charged as terrorism?
Right. So I agree with what you said in your initial statement when you said this isn't a traditional terrorism type of thing. And I'm also of the opinion that the TikTok community is separate and apart from probably mainstream, because as you know, like when you're in social media, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get followers and you're trying to get people excited who want to come and watch your page and listen to what you have to say. I don't know that is the what we talked about when we talked about inciting the community or trying to alter government policy. I think I don't believe this guy's getting a statue anytime soon. However, I understand the reach with which we're trying to do to bring him into the framework of terrorism, but I'm just not sure. For me, this guy's a murderer, and he deserves to be behind bars. But I don't know if this is terrorism as we have described it and seen it in our nation up to this point.
Let's take a listen to the police commissioner, Jessica Tisch.
And let me be perfectly clear. In the nearly 2 weeks since Mr. Thompson's killing, we have seen a shocking and appalling celebration of cold-blooded murder. Social media has erupted with praise for this cowardly attack. People ghoulishly plastered posters threatening the other CEOs with an X over Mr. Thompson's picture, as though he was some sort of a sick trophy. And yesterday, The New York Post reported that some extreme activists were circulating a deck of cards with other most wanted CEOs to be targeted for assassination. These are the threats of a lawless, violent mob who would trade in their own vigilantism for the rule of law that protects us all.
All right, Michael Sterling, your thoughts about how this has now become a first-degree case in New York, which is because of their definition of terrorism and how they see these facts falling.
Yeah, I'm you know, Vinny, when I see prosecutors handling cases like this, I know that the fact that they added terrorism, I don't know what that achieves from a prosecutorial standpoint, right? You've got the first-degree cold-blooded murder that is
no,
simple,
it gets
easy,
it to first degree,
simple.
Michael. Without the terrorism, it's second degree. Without the terrorism, it's second degree in New York. New York, you got to either kill a police officer, a witness, murder for hire, an EMT, a judge, something like that. And terrorism is the only arguable way you could get this to first degree, which is life without parole, versus second degree, which is 25 to life for a 26-year-old.
Well, Vinny, well, you know, that's extremely unusual. Obviously, I'm not familiar with New York state law, but that's extremely unusual. Typically, when you have a cold-blooded assassination with no, with malice aforethought that was premeditated and planned, that alone gets you to first degree. But if the state is using it to get it to first degree as an act of terrorism, I think the general definition of terrorism, right, is when you use some sort of act of violence for political or ideological purposes. When you use an act of violence or threats of act of violence for those purposes, then you get to an act of terrorism. And here, as they're mentioning civilian population, people on social media, TikTok, Instagram are now taking what he did, and you're having copycats, you're having threats. So I certainly think you can get there to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, especially if you're using it to get to first degree murder. But I mean, this is it's a cold-blooded killing and attempted to accomplish a political ideological goal.
If it was in any other state, you wouldn't even need the terrorism aspect. I mean, you go to Georgia, you go to Florida. It's life without parole. It's clear.
Right.
So this is my thought on all of this, on what this actually does. This now creates an issue for the prosecution and defense to actually talk about or fight about, right? You can either fight about it in court, whether it doesn't fit the legal definition of terrorism, or the two sides get together and the prosecutor comes over, Ann Bremner, and says, you know what, cop to the second degree, and we'll argue about the sentencing.
Well, absolutely. And it is a weird statute. When I looked at it, it looks like our aggravated murder statute in Washington State, where you could have the death penalty if it wasn't at this point not being used. But so you go to murder 2, you get them to murder 1 with this terrorism. And I guess you use that amorphous language of coercion of a population, to say it's
or
not
intimidation. It's committing an act that were intended to intimidate or coerce a civilian population. I don't know. Is it the civilian population of CEOs? Right? Because you're not trying to influence government. You're trying to influence health insurance companies in the private sector.
Right. And I think that's what they're using. I mean, it's kind of that kind of catch-all amorphous language, because nothing else in that statute applies.
No.
Nothing.
So
and you're
Rick,
right, they're probably going to try and plea bargain.
Rick, do you think they're going to sit down and try to work this out, or is the defense going to roll up their sleeves and try to get the first degree thrown out?
I mean, at the end of the day, they got him with the fake IDs, the ghost gun, the manifesto. It's everything but a stand-up confession. So I think they're in a negotiation posture. So if I'm negotiating in this case, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to talk about, hey, you come down from that and get to here, maybe we can talk.
Yeah, because Michael, if it's just second degree, the prosecution's not having a conversation about manslaughter. That doesn't even come in the room. But you could have a legitimate conversation, first degree versus second degree in New York, and then let the judge figure out what the sentence is.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So you do it, as I was mentioning earlier, if it's going to achieve a goal, that's why you add that to the indictment. And here the goal could be one, to make sure you've got life without the possibility on the table. That can also give you more leverage in your negotiations to get them to potential, take the plea to 25 to life, because then at least in his mind, he's going to have an opportunity at freedom someday.
Yeah, 25 to life. He'll still be young. Younger than I am.
He will.
He'll be younger than I am when he's eligible for parole. Wow. All right. Great. Rick King, Ann Bremner, Mike Sterling staying with us. When we come back, some new details about Mangione Plus coming up next hour.
Tonight on Vinnie Politan Investigates, the accused Long Island Gilgo Beach killer has been connected to a 7th victim. How did police solve the case? We investigate.
Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates, tonight, 9/8 Central, only on Court TV.
People wanted answers, and people started locking their doors.
You know what it means. You know what you did, right?
Please hear me out. Please.
I said, OJ, everybody thinks you're guilty.
Following breaking news out of New York City as police are searching for a gunman.
He ignores numerous other pedestrians, approaches the victim from behind, and shoots him in the back.
A person has been taken into custody in Altoona, Pennsylvania in connection to the CEO shooting.
We must do more on the federal level to clamp down on the availability of ghost guns.
It feels good to get a guy like that off the street.
We are here to announce that Luigi Mangione, the defendant, is charged with 1 count of murder in the 1st degree and 2 counts of murder in the 2nd degree, including 1 count of murder in the 2nd degree as an act of terrorism.
Now, from all the evidence that's been made public and researching some of his background and everything, we've got sort of a sketch of Luigi Mangione, but what we don't really have is what was going on in his mind. Like, what was he thinking? Writer Gurwinder Bogle spoke to Luigi Mangione in April multiple times just before he disappeared and went off the grid. He later joined CNN to describe some of the fears that Mangione had for society and for himself.
And he was very concerned with things like online porn. Like, he believed that a lot of men were not going out and meeting women because they were addicted to porn. He was really concerned about video games. He believed that people were not making accomplishments. They were not accomplishing things in the real world because they were getting sort of these dopamine hits from video games. And he also believed social media addiction was a big problem that was taking people's agency away from them as well. He feared this was happening to him as well.
Okay, we need some help. I need some help. Joining me, psychotherapist, CEO of Life Counseling Solutions, Dr. Janie Lacey is with us. All right, let's see if we can dive into this just a little bit. So he's talking to this guy, and on the mind of Mangione is he's so concerned that young men like him aren't going out and meeting women because they just go online and they're addicted to pornography. They're addicted to video games. They're accomplishing things in video games and not accomplishing things in life. There's an addiction to social media, right? And he's concerned that this may be consuming him as well. So how does that relate to what we're talking about now, which is the assassination of a CEO of the nation's largest healthcare insurance company?
Well, you know, Vinny, when we consider what we now know, before he was actually acquired, we would think that this was some type of personal vendetta. But, you know, when we think about it from a clinical perspective, we look at the behavioral patterns and his underlying motivation. So based off of the individual's direct interview with him, we can think that in particular there's a psychological distinction that lies in his intent when we're looking at what he believed were things that were affecting him personally, and then thinking about this goal that he has that when we think about the healthcare system, the CEO, and it being a community in and of itself, and how much it's such a big business and how much it affects so many different people in different ways, whatever he was taking into consideration, then we now see that he was tying all these things together to create this, potentially broader social or even potentially political change through in his own personal vendettas when we consider this. But regardless, his behavioral pattern suggests that whatever his reasonings truly are, it's not based in reality, it's based in delusion. But whether it's based in reality or delusion, he had an intent to impact the community in a significant way by sending a message. And we now come to discover that through his own writings, through this manifesto, to get some insight to his thinking and tying all these things together.
What would you say to someone who came to you looking for some counseling and was concerned about porn addiction and not taking part in, trying to date, didn't want to really accomplish anything outside of getting to the next level of his video game, and when he wasn't doing that or watching porn, he's scrolling on his social media? What would you say to someone like that? Could they be fixed?
Well, first, Vinnie, those that we treat that have sexual compulsivities or sexual addiction, it does not lead to murder in many cases. But if someone was to come to us and they had sexual addiction or sexual compulsivity, right, and it's affecting their life, it's affecting their motivation, their social abilities, their abilities to achieve their goals in their life, right? We also know that this is also a real thing for a lot of individuals when they're consumed in compulsive ways. So we do know there's treatment out there, and the first thing that they would potentially come to admit is exactly that, is to come out of denial and to be able to look at something that's in their life that's affecting their ability to be a productive community member or to achieve whatever their personal goals are. So then when they come in and they're looking at these types of things that are affecting them, we have to start with their mindset, right? Because we know that people cannot change behavior, and which will then affect their decision making in life unless they believe that they can. So if someone was coming in and they felt hopeless, right, then we would have to deal with one area of why they feel hopeless. But provoking change, looking at their mindset, and then looking at some behavioral patterns that can give them some traction where they can meet their goals and they can create some change in their life, which then can create more of a positive impact in their mindset, and especially if it's affecting them socially and dating and to have relationships and these types of things. Absolutely, someone can be changed, but the key is that they want to change those things, Vinnie, and they're committed to a system to change.
It seemed like he did. Now, do you think he's looking at himself now as being productive because he took out a CEO and people, if he even knows, people online are like cheering for him?
Well, the unfortunate thing, Vinnie, is that someone that is delusional and they do things like this to the extreme, in their mindset, they absolutely can. In their delusion, believe that they achieved their goal or believe that they were productive. But we know that that is delusional because we absolutely know that what he has did, and our heart goes out to the CEO's family, his wife, his kids, right? It's affected a whole system in a way that there's a lot of grief and loss right now. So in his delusional mind, absolutely could he think that he was productive and maybe achieved his sick goals, but this became an object versus this is a real man that had a family who was living his life and was raising children, right? There's a whole system that has been affected in this grief process.
Dr. Janie Lacey, thank you so much. Appreciate your insight and very valuable time. All right, Think Tank still with us. Rick King, Ann Bremner, Michael Sterling. Michael Sterling, I heard Dr. Janie Lacey say the word delusional several times. Do you think in this case now that some sort of psychological evaluation, that becomes an avenue or an approach by his new high-powered attorney to try to mitigate something in this case?
Yeah, Vinny, I mean, and here's the thing. When you're a defense attorney, you have to keep all of your options on the table, right? So you're not going to remove any option off of the table this early in the defense of your client. So you're looking at everything. So yes, psychological evaluation, both a competency psychological evaluation and then a substantive psychological evaluation to see if there were any psychological issues, sociopathic issues, anything that could have influenced his behavior in any way that he didn't either have control of or couldn't tell right from wrong. You're going to want to explore that potential avenue. So absolutely, you don't take an option off the table this early in a defense.
Rick King, in his only real public appearance since being arrested, he appeared unhinged. He was like, there he is, right there. He appeared somewhat unhinged, did not appear like the person that was described or the person we saw giving the valedictorian speech years ago at his private prep school down in Maryland, $40,000 a year. So the fact that he appears unhinged here, what he did clearly was, you know, unhinged. What he did was unhinged as well. I mean, everything, the thinking, how can that part of what this is all about play inside a courtroom? Is it something that a judge might show some compassion for when sentencing him if he gets a second degree?
I mean, I don't know if it goes to the judge's sentencing, but I think if you just, going back to what Michael said about when you talk about the evaluations, you talk about that his unhinged behavior when they get him out of the car. You talk about clearly this act that he did that was, you know, not normal. And then you even back up further and you talk about his parents listing him as a missing person, him isolating himself from his friends. And so start from there and you work forward back the other way, and you can see that there's this trend of his, that he's becoming more distant and more and probably engulfed in some sort of mental episode that culminated in this this act that he did against you know, the CEO of UnitedHealthcare. And so I think that's going to be prominent in whatever defense we talk about, and in this case going forward altogether. I think you have to include all those things.
All right, think tank staying with us. Big announcement, folks. Where are you going to be tomorrow at 7 p.m. just before this program? You're going to be watching Court TV or Scripps News. We've got a special report, assassination of a CEO. In depth, we've got our correspondents and reporters all over the country covering this. That'll be Wednesday, tomorrow, 7 p.m. right here on your front row seat to justice. And yes, I'll be sitting in that front row hosting that special report. When we come back, we've got some new updates out of Madison, Wisconsin in that private school shooting. The shooter, a 15-year-old girl. More details when we return.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here today. We'll be providing an additional update as we have moved now into the investigation phase of this tragic incident. I'll be making some prepared remarks and we will not be taking questions. The past 24 hours have been a flurry of emotion, sadness, anger, disappointment, grief for the Madison community. We were brought together by a tragedy, and today 3 families woke up this morning to a world without a loved one. And that can never be outdone. In the midst of this tragedy, our community has come together in an incredible demonstration of support from Madison and indeed the state of Wisconsin and our nation. I'd like to provide an important clarification. Yesterday, after looking at the computer-aided dispatch system, it seems as if a call came from a second grader. It actually read, the call came from a second grade teacher. We know a document has been widely shared on social media. At this time, we cannot verify its authenticity. We have detectives working today to determine where this document originated and who actually shared it online. At this time, we cannot verify the document. We ask that you not share the document or spread any information that may be false. Our department will provide an update on this document when we can. There are always signs of a school shooting before it occurred. Some of you have reached out about Rupnow's social media activity prior to yesterday's shooting. We're looking into her online activity. We're asking anyone who knew her or who may have insights into her feelings leading up to yesterday to please contact the Madison Area Crime Stoppers. Again, we are working to authenticate the documents that you see online that some are referring to as a manifesto. And as soon as we do that, we will let you know. Now, the process for doing that is looking at original documents that may have been taken from the suspect's home, looking at information that may be on laptops or on computer to determine if this document originated from our suspect.
All right, we've got a suspect, but the suspect took her own life. 15-year-old Natalie, also known as Samantha Rupnow, just 15 years old. But now they're talking about there may have been a manifesto. The investigation is continuing despite the fact that the suspect is no longer alive. Let's bring back in our think tank Rick King, Ann Bremner, Michael Sterling. Ann Bremner, how important is this investigation? How important is the transparency of this investigation? Because a lot of times they investigate, they say nothing.
Right, like we had with the other girl in Tennessee. We don't really know what her manifesto was, remember? So we look at this and let's be transparent, but also what are we learning from these shootings? Weren't there 300 and some odd school shootings this year alone? I mean, I just look at this and I can't believe every time you turn around, there's one of these shootings. And do we read the manifestos? Do we look at what are the trigger points? What about the parents, like the Crumbleys, who went to jail for enabling their son in a school shooting multiple students, like this young woman. She was shooting at a shooting range with her dad. He got a gun and got her in a gun club. And she's writing things and saying things like she hates all men, especially her dad, and maybe she wants to kill herself. But, it might be more interesting, I'm not sure what her word was, to take out other people too. I mean, where is this coming from, in our society? I know these are big questions, but what are we learning from these? We didn't have these decades ago, ever. And now we have them all the time.
Yeah, I think the number's 83 for this year. Rick King.
300 then altogether. 300 overall. Thank you.
So Rick, what is the goal of an investigation like this? Is it just to learn, or while they're investigating, are they looking for other people who may have played some role? Like Ann mentioned, parents. Are they looking at all of that at once, or are they really focusing in on and trying to figure out what went wrong here?
So Vinnie, years ago, it would be that they're looking at what went wrong and with the motive and why this happened, and probably as corollary to that was trying to figure out if there was somebody else involved. That's always going to be part of the investigation. But I think now, as we've evolved into these things, I think that law enforcement has actually turned a focus to see what involvement parents have in this now in these school shootings. I think we're trying to figure out a way to encompass the parents or someone else to try to I don't know if we're trying to spread the blame here or do whatever, but I think based on what happened in the other case where we arrested the parents and charged them with this, I think that's now the trend that we're trying to involve, just trying to capture everything with one net.
Absolutely. Now, in those two cases that we covered on Court TV, Michael Sterling, the shooter was still alive. Here, we have a case where the shooter is no longer alive, and I feel like there may be some pressure on law enforcement to hold someone responsible.
Yeah, certainly, Vinnie, there could be that pressure, and a decade ago we weren't talking about charging parents in school shootings, but now you've seen it happen on multiple occasions. not only parents, but anyone else who might have had any involvement. Someone, provided a weapon, or you have to do the investigation because you don't want to leave questions unanswered. You don't want to leave stones unturned, and you certainly want to learn, to Rick's point, whatever you can learn to ensure something like this doesn't happen in the future, or at least people are being diligent about trying to make sure if they see warning signs or things like that. So to the extent the investigation can inform and instruct the public in that community and around the country as to what to look for, what things we can learn to try to prevent tragedies. As you mentioned, Vinnie, 83 school shootings this year. That's more than one a week. So we obviously have a problem that needs to be solved.
And Ann Bremner, take a listen to this. Here's the chief talking about the motive.
Identifying a motive is our top priority. But at this time, it appears that the motive was a combination of factors. Again, we cannot share that information at this time because we do not want to jeopardize the investigation and those who are currently cooperating with us.
And my guess is the motive is impacted by mental illness. And Bremner, I think we'll inevitably find that there was something going on with this 15-year-old girl. Is Ann with us? We lost Ann Bremner. Let's throw that over to Rick King. I think mental illness is going to play a role here. As it seems every time it comes back to that, playing a role. Not a defense if she had survived, but plays a role in what happened here.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to have someone walk into a building full of children and execute them and not talk about mental illness. I mean, I feel like that's just part and parcel with the evaluation of what's going on, because there's nobody who I think is sane that walks into a building and does that. So I think that's part of the analysis, and unfortunately in this case, that's not going to be able to be accomplished because of the tragic ending.
Big thanks to our think tank, Rick King, Michael Sterling, and Ann Bremner, who we lost connection with. But thank you so much. We'll see you again really soon. When we return, I'll reveal something else you need to know tonight, plus coming up next hour. Tonight on Vinnie Politan investigates the accused Long Island serial killer preparing for trial, and now new charges connected to a 7th victim. And tonight we take a look at the detailed plans of the killer revealed by prosecutors.
Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates, coming up next, only on Court TV.
UnitedHealthcare CEO was gunned down. Police have arrested Luigi Mangione.
Court TV and Scripps News take you inside the investigation that's captured the nation's attention.
Assassination of a CEO, Wednesday at 7 on Court TV.
Time to reveal something else you need to know tonight. Let's take a look at our big board, and there she is, Hannah Kobayashi. She was unaware people were looking for her when she was missing. Here's her statement provided by her aunt to people.com. At daybreak on December 15th, I crossed the border back into the United States. My focus now is on my healing, my peace, and my creativity. I'm deeply grateful to my family and everyone who has shown me kindness and compassion during this time. I was unaware of everything that was happening in the media while I was away, and I'm still processing it all. I kindly ask for respect from myself, my family, and my loved ones as I navigate through this challenging time. Thank you for your understanding. She didn't mention her father taking her life when he went to Los Angeles to search for her. Interesting. We have a missing child. Please take a look at your television screen. This is Mariah Elena Colon, missing since December 10th. Out of Worcester, Massachusetts, just 15 years old. If you see Mariah, pick up the phone, make a call, 911, 1-800-THE-LOST, or you can call the Worcester Police Department in Massachusetts. That phone number is on your screen. Let's see if we can get Mariah to a safe place tonight. Don't go anywhere. We've got another hour of live true crime, big developments in the Long Island serial Gilgo Beach case. We'll have all of that. In the meantime, please don't forget to hug the kids.